comrades, I'm very pleased to be here in Yorkshire. The waters of the Aire, I believe was the river running through Leeds. It shows my local knowledge. Has changed many times over since I was last here in this city and in Yorkshire, a couple of years at least. But it's not just the waters of the Aire that's changed, it's the map of Europe, the map of the world, and certainly the political and economic map of Britain itself also. Now, socialists, and particularly Marxists, are organically optimistic. But we've got special reasons to be optimistic at this particular moment in time. It could be summed up in two words: Donald Trump. And the second reason would be what Mike referred to, and that was the visits that we've made to Spain and the establishment of our new Spanish section, which later on in the meeting we will report will have big repercussions, especially in the Spanish-speaking world and internationally, about the future of the CWI. Now, we predicted soon after Trump was elected that he would be the best recruiting sergeant for the class struggle and for the ideas of socialism. And that's been demonstrated to everybody, not just our comrades here, but to the broad mass of working people and the poor throughout the world. The inauguration triggered off mass demonstrations, which were the biggest since the time of the Vietnam War. Were even bigger than at the time of the Iraq War, because there was a certain kind of national consensus in the US at that stage. And we played the key role in that. It was our comrades in the US, of Sharma in particular, who went to the airport at SeaTac and organised against the proposal to ban Muslims from coming into the US. By the way, I could give other examples of where, for instance, she's a big figure in India, where she comes from, precisely for the same reason. And it shows the way that the movement, through this individual, a key member of the CWI, is the way that the movement is interlinked on a world scale itself. Trump has no political legitimacy in the eyes of the American people and in the eyes of the working class as a whole. He got almost 3 million less votes than Hillary Clinton, and that's saying something given the unpopularity of Hillary Clinton herself. However, at his press conference last week, he made the astonishing claim he was ahead in the popular vote of any president before until Robert Reagan. And when the press contradicted, he said, "Oh, really? Oh, I'll have to change that particular figure when I speak next." He's introduced this ban on Muslims, you know, allegedly in the cause of fighting terrorism in the US and worldwide. And yet the statistics that are being produced have demonstrated that you're more likely to be killed by a child who picks up its parent's gun and shoots you accidentally than by a terrorist, on the basis of the number of people who've been killed by terrorists in the course of the last period. And not only that, an astonishing fact really, you have more chance of being killed by a filing cabinet falling on you than if you were by a terrorist assassin in the US itself. But what this indicates is a deep split really in the ranks of the ruling class itself. Those of us who lived through the 1960s will know about Watergate and the impeachment, the threatened trial of Nixon, which is now posed for Trump himself, according to the press. Even the Observer this morning says, shrewd observers think the Trump bump will be a precursor to a Trump dump, which could then turn into a Trump slump. It's not a bad way of putting it about the future of Trump itself. And this, by the way, against the background when the whole of the world is like a lake of petrol, with an accidentally dropped match could trigger off an explosion. By the way, also as a precursor, the Observer has something to say, But we have the example of what happened in Mexico, where the increase in petrol prices triggered off riots. We have the riots, because that's what they are in Paris over the last couple of days, over the unspeakable attack on this young black worker in the banlieue, in the outskirts of Paris. And last but not least, related to us, the show we're connected, the observers say some Tories fear blood on the streets in a couple of years. The only thing wrong with that is it could be not a couple of years, but a couple of months, given the scale of attacks which have been made on the working class itself. This presidency of Trump is a regime of crisis. Of course, he tells lies, but that's organic to capitalism. In relation to Blair, one commentator said, he lies as he breathes. And actually, in the last couple of days, he shows that. He's called for a rising in Britain. He has more chance of self-raising flowers. Self-raising flowers got more of a chance of promoting a rising than Blair, given his discredited position itself. And the idea that Russia was intervening in the US, well, that's, according to James Wellesby, yeah, that's true. We do it to them, they do it to us. There is a history of American imperialism in Chile, in the Central America, and so on, arguing or intervening to change election results. And there's nothing new about this, and this is a spurious example used by the Democrats to provoke a conflict. The fact is that in America now, 6 out of 10 of the population oppose further foreign adventures. Trump is an important factor in really changing or indicating the change or reflecting the change in world politics and world relations at the present time. The relationship with Putin is being referred to as the axis of upheaval. And by the way, that is the real position of capitalism in the next period. Really, the world now is revolving about 3 dominant blocs which are jostling for control. The US is still economically and militarily, although it's weakened, the dominant power. China is still the world's largest manufacturing producer and will rival US capitalism economically at a certain stage. And its military power has also been enhanced in the last period. Russia is economically weakened because of the effects of the collapse of Stalinism and the disintegration of the planned economy, but also, at the same time, it's boosted its military spending, and it now has considerable reach, which was demonstrated in the course of the Middle East war itself. I haven't got time to go into this, but our perspective, where there were certain skeptics that it was unlikely for the present Syrian regime of Assad to be overthrown, has been borne out, largely because of the intervention of Russia in collaboration with other powers, but also because of the 100 million Shia bloc in the Middle East itself, which prevented, really, Saudi Arabia, because that's what it came down to, organizing a Sunni bloc to overthrow, with the support of imperialism, overthrow the regime in Syria itself. And the real gainers in the Middle East is Iran. Saudi Arabia has lost out, and in my opinion, the House of Saud, the Saudi Arabian regime, which has been the gendarme, the policeman of the Middle East, the counter-revolutionary force that has rolled back parts of the Egyptian, parts of the Arab revolution itself, the House of Saud has been weakened. There is an attempt now, through Trump and Israel, to form an alliance, possibly against Iran, in the Middle East, but that will only provoke and only enhance the already shameful position that exists in the Middle East, where even the bourgeois talk about a 30-year war. Now that won't happen because of the intervention of the working class itself. Let us remember that it's only 6 years since the masses rose in Egypt and rose in Tunisia first of all, then in Egypt, and overthrew 4 military regimes. By the way, without organization, from below. And that's a lesson To us, we're an organisation that's trying to create powerful organisations of the working class. But the objective conditions provoked an uprising throughout North Africa and the Middle East, which resulted in the overthrow of the Tunisian regime, the Libyan regime, Yemen, so on and so forth. And by the way, imperialism was incapable of intervening at that stage. Obama was utterly incapable of doing what had been done by American imperialism before. However, they were given the excuse to intervene because of the military counter-revolutionary intervention in Libya, and all of the rest you know is the case. But before the revolution was derailed, and it was because the masses did not have a party. They could rise against the dictatorship, but in order to consolidate their power, in order then to go on to create a new society, they need their own organisation, they need the creation of a new state. They left the security apparatus in the hands of the old regime in Egypt, and therefore the revolution was derailed. But not before evoking mass support internationally, particularly in the case, as we know, where the Egyptian flag was flown in America, in Wisconsin itself. Now, the whole of the Middle East, unfortunately, is likely to fall back into a period of dislocation. The same process is now beginning in Syria. There's a certain, rather than Turkey, there's a certain Syrianization of Turkey. We have an increased conflict throughout the world. We have the incredible position where Trump has calmly discussed the possibility of a first strike nuclear attack on North Korea. And if you think that's fanciful, by the way, it was revealed in the Financial Times yesterday that Bill Clinton considered the possibility of a first strike, this is a so-called liberal president, a first strike against North Korea, but only desisted from going in that direction because the nuclear facilities in North Korea were underground, and who knows, the North Korean regime might have set off their own attack on the US itself. By the way, if a nuclear accident took place, where a nuclear bomb was triggered, or there was an attack, that would provoke revolution throughout the world. Mass revulsion, and a challenging of the system, the likes of which we would not see. That's why there is this deadlock, if you like, on the question of the nuclear weapons. But we cannot rule out small wars taking place between the US and China, with the jostling that's taking place, for instance, in the South China Sea at the present time. And this situation can be compounded by the development of the world economy. We've had a so-called recovery. Most of the working class in Britain and worldwide haven't noticed. It's been a recovery mostly in the balance sheets and mostly in the pockets of big business, of the capitalists themselves. Now a book has recently come out, and the name of it is very apposite. And it says, "How will capitalism end?" They're discussing the prospects of the demise of their own system. And they come to the comforting conclusion, this is by a German author, by the way, linked to Die Linke, the left party in Germany, and he comes to the conclusion, the authorities, that's the financial and economic authorities, must be scared shitless. And they are. That's a very sober analysis of the position of capitalism at the present time. And by the way, if you think on the economy, why is it that Hillary, if there's a boom taking place, if there's this creation of 250,000 jobs in a month, which was what happened in the earlier part of this year, why didn't Hillary Clinton benefit from that? Normally, an incumbent regime would benefit by the growth prospects of capitalism itself. And the reason for that is these jobs are Mickey Mouse jobs, I don't need to tell you here. They're part-time, they're short-term contracts, they're Mickey Mouse self-employed and so on. In other words, the jobs that existed in the past, long-term jobs and so on, will no longer return to the US as they will no longer return to Britain itself. And when you think about what happened in 2007-8, what we're seeing now is a delayed reaction